Welcome to the ACC Panic Room alongside Lauren Brownlow. I'm Joe Ovies. Duke and North Carolina with wins last night. With Duke, it was one of those not must win, but a much needed win for them. Meanwhile, with the
It's probably a must win.
was it a must win? Okay,
I mean, they were
okay.
5-5.
Yeah. I don't know. It's Georgia Tech's spunky. And given the way that Cameron Indoor is not what we usually associate with Cameron Indoor, I
Right.
could see where you could make some excuses for that. But we'll get to Duke in a little bit because I'm more interested in North Carolina, honestly. They've moved to 6-1 in January. The loss was to Florida State. I don't think there's any shame in losing to a really good Florida State team that might finish at the top of the ACC. Virginia obviously competing for that as well. But Roy Williams was asked whether or not he feels the Tar Heels have turned a corner. This is something that we posed after the win against NC State, Lauren. And Roy was kind of like in the I don't want to define this with labels, the what is this conversation. I don't want to put a label on this right now. That's the kind of vibe I was getting out of Roy Williams. Like I'm not ready to really define where my Tar Heel team is right now.
Yeah, and I think some of that is because it's a little bit because of like what happened last year too, I think, to a degree where they would get a nice win here or there and it would be like, oh, hey, they're figuring it out. Cole Anthony's coming back. Like it's gonna be fun. So anytime they had like even a glimpse of optimism last year, I mean, they won what, like 3 straight before the Duke game, headed into the ACC tournament. I think it was. They played well against Duke, they played okay against Duke. So you're like, okay, maybe. And then they get to the ACC tournament, and they were one of the teams that got to play a game, and it didn't go great.
Didn't look good.
No, so I mean, I think that's part of it for them too. And for Roy probably is like. And look, the thing is, it was 3 weeks ago, I think yesterday, that they had played at Miami and they got that extremely ugly win. And it was their second straight, like, ugly win in ACC play. And you look at that and you're sort of like, okay, they're winning, but like, what does that mean? And how do they look? And is this sustainable? And, they have played much better offensively. I think they've shot over 50%, I think in like 5 of the last 6 halves, if I'm not mistaken. They still turn it over a little bit, but they're making shots. And like before, they were doing both. They were missing shots and turning it over. About the only thing they did well was offensive rebound and put back enough of them and play good enough defense to eke out wins against teams. And now they're making shots, which helps a lot. So, yeah, I mean, I think is that sustainable? Yeah, probably, because I think that they were better than they were shooting early on. They still have to figure out something with the turnovers. That's probably a little more fixable, but I mean,
I think it's fixable, but I also think if you look at the trajectory, the assist to turnover ratio has gotten better with every game. It was good against NC State. It was, I think, a season high assist to turnover ratio last night against Pitt. And that's also a good Pitt team, right? I know they lost to Wake Forest going into this game, but they do have some dudes on that squad, especially Justin Champagny. So that's where you look at the defense that kept Pitt from shooting the ball too well on them. I think they only shot like 40 some odd percent. And yeah, North Carolina's shooting better too. But the thing that I take away more than anything else, it's the North Carolina playing the way you expect North Carolina to play, right? Yes. Typically, we've been focused on Armando Bacot and Day'Ron Sharpe. Yesterday was actually Armando Bacot and Garrison Brooks. But you know that Day'Ron Sharpe can come in and give you those minutes too because they look really, really good together. It's actually something that Armando Bacot said after the game that I thought was interesting. Because all the things that you said about last year's team, I'm with you on that. Absolutely with you on that. They also, last year's team would get a little bit of that like shook mentality. Like, oh my goodness, are we going to like find a brutal way to lose again type of thing?
Right.
And it could kind of get into some feelings ball with them last year. And that was actually a big talking point at the beginning of the season for North Carolina about how, okay, you might have lost the game, but they didn't pack it in, so to speak, right? Like at the Maui Invitational Nashville was kind of that mindset. But Bacot said after this game that they're more talented this year, right? Which I thought was interesting given all the attention that was paid to Cole Anthony. I guess if you're looking at it from the perspective of everything's a little bit more spread out and even, especially when you look in the front
court.
That's
really what it is. They don't have anyone as good as Cole Anthony necessarily, but everyone else around, everyone else is better. for sure.
And that's the important part, because once these guys start to, and I think it's already happening now as we're watching the last two games, they understand their roles. Caleb Love, he fouled out in this game. Maybe it wasn't like his best game, but the point is they're not overextending themselves. They're playing the kind of basketball Roy Williams wants to do. And shocker of shocks, Roy Williams teams are getting better as the season goes on. That's why last year was such an outlier for North Carolina, because typically you see them build on some confidence. And while I understand that the 6-1 is largely done against teams that are not at the top of the ACC, you can watch the games and see them building on each win. I know what Roy Williams said after the game. It's the ACC. Things can get away from you really, really quick. But if I'm a North Carolina fan or I'm the coaching staff, I'm liking the trajectory of this team, as opposed to, say, NC State, which they have to get some things figured out before tonight against Wake Forest, or in the case of Duke, where there is some growth with the Blue Devils as well, and it was really nice to see Jalen Johnson go get it. It was really good to see Duke focus on the things that Mike Krzyzewski had talked about on Monday about getting to the foul line. I think they shot 80% from the line with like 22 shots at the line. And they didn't have that moment of, oh my goodness, is this going to happen to us again against Georgia Tech? Because Georgia Tech was down, double digits at one point. They went on their own little run there. That last 10 minutes of basketball at Cameron Indoor Stadium was highly entertaining. And Duke just went and got the buckets that were needed, whether it was at the line or Jalen Johnson getting to the rack.
Yeah, and look, they could have felt sorry for themselves. I mean, I understood what Coach K was saying after the Louisville game, in the sense that, like, his team played hard. They really fought in that game to win it. They wanted to win really badly. They had a number of chances to win that Louisville game, including a bunch of open shots. They didn't make them. And, you could go two different ways with that. You could go in a shell a little bit and just say, like, okay, I guess it's not meant to be for us, and get a little mopey. But he said all week, he said on Monday that, like, they had a really positive attitude. Actually, he said they're lifting me up, I think was what he said, with their attitude. And I'm kind of like, okay, because it's a young group. That's a little surprising. But then you see that kind of manifest itself against Georgia Tech, where, Georgia Tech, I mean, I'm glad we got that last 10 minutes, because the first 30 was...
Oh, no. It was
really
the only thing entertaining about the first 30 minutes of that game was just Josh Pastner wearing that face mask, and as you pointed out, the face mask says face mask.
It says it on the label.
Yeah, just in case you were confused. Just in case you were confused as to what that was. Oh, is this that's the face shield? Got it.
And here's the thing: like, I've watched some Georgia Tech, but not enough to, like, scrutinize Josh Pastner's sideline manner. I assumed he was wearing the face shield so that he didn't do the coach move of, like, lifting the mask up and down constantly.
Oh, no.
No. He was I'm like,
he's looking like a welder. He's coming up from work, and he's like, oh, what? Huh? What's going on? I'm like, dude, what do you need to move the face shield for at this point?
I'm like, Josh, please. I'm like, so wait, you wear that extra dorky piece of equipment, and it's not even, like, you could be wearing a mask. Like,
I think he's doing it ironic. You wear something that's so obviously terrible looking that you're just doing it ironically. I think that's where Josh Pastner is right now. I think he's leaning into the look.
One of our security buddies who usually works Cameron Indoor Games pointed out that Josh was wearing his security badge around his neck during the game as well. And I just was like, I was like as if someone in that limited attendance would be confused as to who Josh would be.
Well, and Josh Pastner, like, he is young looking. He could just be a confused student that wandered into Cameron Indoor Stadium.
There's something endearing about that kind of awkward dorkiness that I can relate to. I will say that for Josh. Like,
I give him credit that he's leaning into that. I also give him credit for his sideburns. Those chops are looking good. I don't know if they get bushy enough that it actually captures the air globules that might come out of the mask. I don't know. Maybe they get caught up in there. I have no idea, but it is quite the look. It is quite the look. The thing about Duke, though, going forward, we can wrap on this, just like with North Carolina, you don't really have a lot of what you would consider Q1 wins on the table, right? I think North Carolina's win over Pitt does give them one, because Pitt had a good record going into this point. There's also some games that need to be rescheduled for Duke and North Carolina too, remember? So I know there's been a lot of hand-wringing about whether these teams are going to make the NCAA tournament. I think there's too much time left. I think there's too much uncertainty when it comes to the schedule to really make any sort of definitive statements. In North Carolina's case, I just like the way they're playing. And in Duke's particular case, Kay has been as even-keeled as you can be about the group itself with the losses and everything else. I think that's what was so kind of disappointing in the way that things were reacted to on Saturday, with the way he responded to Jake Piazza's question about, how do you assess this upcoming week, which was a valid question. K's not he's not mad at the team. He doesn't look stressed out. He's just I think a couple of years ago, if you pay enough attention to Coach K press conferences, he likes to talk about, somebody would ask him, have you ever seen a Zion player before, right? Or how do you compare Zion? What do you always say? Well, he's the first Zion I ever had, right? And he always, how many times will he drop you run your own race? I don't want to compare this team to other teams and things like that.
Yeah, yes. Every Duke team is very much its own entity. That is true.
They're all special snowflakes. He doesn't have a favorite, But
I do think it's interesting.
But it's true how he handles it.
Yeah, you're right. But it is, you can get the sense some years versus others that he has more affection for a particular group than he might some others. And I think that he does have a lot of affection for this group. And I think he knows they need a little more love than maybe some of his other teams do.
Yeah.
And that part's been interesting to watch too, because let's be real, Duke, it cannot, no matter how much talent they have, Duke cannot really play the role of a scrappy underdog almost any time. But this group, I think, I wouldn't call them a scrappy underdog necessarily. I mean, they have talent, obviously, but they can sort of adopt that persona a little bit. And I think that that's benefited them, because they have had to kind of I'm not saying that they got handed things in the past, right? But we have seen it. We've seen it live just covering games at Cameron. We've seen teams come in there and just wilt, right? Mm-hmm. And partially just under the Cameron-ness of it all, And I think Duke this year has really had to fight for a lot more of that kind of stuff. Nothing has come easily to this group. Jalen Johnson missing all that time, et cetera. Mark Williams really hadn't played much. He played great last night. They've had to really kind of fight and scratch and claw for everything they've gotten this year. And I think that Coach K has a certain affection for that. And I think he knows, that's the thing. He's had some groups and he's had some teams that don't play as hard maybe, or don't care as much about defense or anything like that. And I think part of why he's been so defensive of this group, even if their 3-point defense is way worse than what Duke usually does. It's jarring to see them 300th in the country in 3-point defense, but they're trying hard, they're fighting hard. They're doing what they can. And I think that is, Coach K recognizes that, I think, and it's why I think he has a particular affection for this group. And I think it's why he was kind of in his feelings a little bit after the Louisville game, because they did try so hard to win that game and they just couldn't do it. And you saw him last night. I mean, he was giddy. That was a kind of theme for Duke and Carolina. It was Coach K was giddy, Garrison Brooks was giggling after the game. I think they were just happy to see the work that they put in, or the work that their team has put in pay off. And yeah, so it'll be interesting to see what they do. I have no idea what they're going to do moving forward.
I mean, if I had as we are approaching the first meeting between Duke and North Carolina, I would still give the edge to North Carolina because of the front court.
Yes.
If Carolina's going to play their game, that's going to be a problem for Duke, straight up. But we still have a little bit of time to see how these teams kind of marinate and come together and make a delicious dish.
But isn't it nice that they're playing well going into it?
Yeah. It's not like last year, where you have no idea. Everybody was down on North Carolina and all those kind of things, right?
Well, I mean, even Duke's 5-5 going into this game. If Duke had lost and then they lost to Clemson, that'd be super depressing leading into Carolina Duke, regardless of what Carolina did. It'd be well, this is going to be okay. But
no, Lauren, come on. You know better. Come on. You know better than that. You know how it is when it comes to these two teams playing. We're still going to find, despite the records, it's always going to be entertaining.
I mean, to be fair, remember how we mocked that last year? And then, in the first game between those two, somehow Carolina, they should have won it.
They should have won. They should have won. But yes, they do end up producing some entertaining games regardless. That's going to wrap it up for this edition of the ACC Panic Room. We'll be back in action tonight with North Carolina State and Wake Forest. The rivalry.
Yes, rivalry.
The rivalry.
Wait, this isn't even during rivalry week. Who messed this schedule up?
I don't know. Totally screwed up that Wake Forest and State are not playing on a big rivalry week. But we'll pop on the Panic Room later tonight. See you then.